All right, welcome back, my friends. I'm John, and welcome to All Cars, where we talk about all cars all the time. This is my opinion channel, and today we're going to do a huge one I'm really excited about. It is another reaction video to a MotorWeek retro review, and this one was the 1982 Econobox comparison. They tested 4 different ones. Now, I watched this probably 3 years ago, maybe longer than that. I don't even know. It was released in December 2016, and it says the Dodge Colt, VW Rabbit, the Nissan Sentra, and the Renault Le Car. And I'm really excited about this because 82 was not well known for performance. I see some odd designs, I see some really slow ones, I see some weird choices where you wonder what people were thinking, but this is a big one. The original video is 29 minutes long, so add on my commentary. I have no idea how long this will last. I hope that YouTube will let me upload it, but I hope it ends up being a lot of fun, and I hope that you enjoy it as much as I do. Hey, if you like these, let me know, because I have a lot of fun with these. I'd like to keep doing them, but I'd like your opinion. So let's jump into it.
Hello, and welcome to MotorWeek. I'm glad you're with us. This will be a first for MotorWeek, our first Comparo car road test. Our 4 subjects, right behind me, a quartet of modern front-drive 4-door subcompacts, those with wheelbases under 96 inches. We're going to see which one or ones might do you best service in commuting and everyday family duties. Our 4 contestants. First, from West Germany, by way of Pennsylvania, the venerable Volkswagen Rabbit. Next, a Datsun by any other new name, the Nissan Sentra. Third, from the Fifth Republic, the Renault Le Car. And lastly, this Mitsubishi-made Dodge Colt. Now, before we start, a pencil and paper will come in handy to help you make your own judgments. We used 6 testers, and they each had 200 points to award, divided among 5 categories. 30 points for appearance, which includes styling and interior-exterior body panel fit, and also paint finish. 50 points for practicality, how much each car will hold comfortably, and how much each one cost. 40 points for performance, that's handling and acceleration. 30 points for braking, and another biggie, 50 points for mileage, perhaps the most important concern of any small car. Each tester was free to award the points in any way he or she wanted. And the winning car is the one that gets the most number of points out of the 1,200 available.
All right, so based on those criteria, I kind of think I know how this would already play out. I kind of think that, well, I'm not going to spoil it. I'm not going to spoil it with my opinion up front. I think I've got an order, so if you haven't done it, come up with an order in your head and let's see how it goes.
So here we go with our first star seeker, the Dodge Colt. It's appropriate that the Mitsubishi-made Colt comes first in our comparison, since it seems to have won some sort of unofficial prize in Detroit. Literally dozens of Colts have been bought by domestic manufacturers. They've been tearing them to pieces, trying to find out how such a tiny car outside can be so roomy inside. One Detroit engineer confessed to us that the Colt is the optimum box on 4 wheels. It may end up being closely copied in any domestically made future subcompact.
That's really interesting to hear, because when you think about the good products that the big 3 were making over in Europe, you think about what the Japanese were doing and how everybody was so scared of the Japanese and their space efficiency. And you even think about what Volkswagen was doing. I mean, it's hard to argue that the Rabbit was not, maybe not a reliability, but a leader at that time. That the Mitsubishi would be what manufacturers were tearing apart to figure out how to recreate in their own way as an example of space efficiency. I mean, I guess I could see that, but I've driven must be the next generation of Mitsubishi, and it was I mean, you know, it was kind of nimble and it was certainly thrifty, but it was cheap. You know, it was reliable. Don't get me wrong. I'm not trying to bash it as not being reliable, but you know, the doors were thin. It was tinny. At highway speeds, the doors would actually bow out from the difference in pressure. It was just a cheap car. So kind of hard to believe that they're talking so highly about the Mitsubishi here.
One of the things that makes the Colt so unusual for an Econobox is that it's actually quite handsomely styled. The shovel nose front end is right up there with the latest in design. Rubber and chrome bumpers are well integrated with the fenders.
The styling has come a long way. At a quick glance, I thought this was third out of the four of them in terms of styling. I don't think it's particularly handsome. I think the rear end is weak, and I don't know how you can have this big chrome bumper hanging off the front and consider that well integrated, but 1982, right?
Fit and finish, which is usually superior in Japanese cars, was typically excellent. Paint was evenly applied and contained no runs, drips, or errors. All body seams were tight-fitting with even gaps.
You know, that's something that you hear a lot in these old reviews, is where they're like, well, the paint doesn't have runs in it. I can't remember the last time that, actually, yes, I can. The last time I heard somebody complain about the paint job on a new modern car was a Tesla. But when was the last time you heard about a paint problem with a Ford, Chrysler, General Motors, or anything like that? So it's funny how standards have changed in essentially 40 years.
Not only did our Colt have the larger optional 1.6-liter four-cylinder, but it was also the only one of our test cars straddled with an automatic transmission. Still, its 6-second passing time from 40 to 55, though a bit slow, was comparable to all its competition. Good low-power traits are common to subcompacts, and the Colt is no exception. A time of 10 seconds flat and 50 miles per hour rates a good grade in our 500-foot stoplight drag course. Even over the standing quarter mile, the Colt tried to live up to its name. It came in with a fair report of 19.5 seconds and 69 miles per hour.
So what I was going to say was, I wish they'd do a 0 to 60 test. They did that on my first reaction video to the Pontiac 1000, and that donkey took its sweet time of 30 seconds. Here, this is seeming quite nimble.
If it had had either of the two available manual gearboxes, it could have easily won all the marbles for straight-line acceleration. And once off the straight and narrow, you can begin to see why Colts are the current favorite for East Coast parking lot handling competitions. The car tracks right where you think it should. Control is precise, despite rather slow rack and pinion steering. Any temptation for the light rear end to swing wide is quickly telegraphed to the driver's senses.
You know, and I'm going to interject right there that comparing that again with that Pontiac 1000, which is the Chevy Citation that was designed in the 70s but still sold through the 80s, it had a old ball type steering rack. Well, here we go. You've got a cheap Dodge Colt Mitsubishi design with rack and pinion. It's one of those hundreds of little things that the Japanese started doing and started integrating earlier, and then did very, very well, that showed the American manufacturers is just maybe a bit behind the times, even on some of the smaller pieces, smaller parts.
About the only major complaints have to do with an excessive amount of torque steer. It helped pull the car into left turns, but hampered right ones. And skinny 13-inch tires tried to roll under the body when pushed.
I'm sorry, I've got to say, this has a 1.6 liter with an automatic, and they've already said that if it had a manual, it might have been the fastest one, and now they're complaining about the torque steer from a 1.6 liter engine. I'm stunned. I don't know what else to say. That's hilarious.
Ride is typically bouncy, but harsh only over poor road surfaces. In our high-speed emergency lane-changing course, however, trying to sling this little beast around too hard does quickly exhibit the limits of the car's suspension. For economy cars, practicality often begins with price. With a base of $4,995 and our test car entering at $7,500, the Colt placed about midway against its competition. Also about average was its turning circle at 34 feet. Chrysler spends a lot of money telling us how Colt can carry 5 in good comfort. Well, we found it more practical for 4 normal-size adults, although entry and exit is typically hampered by the small doors. Our standard 4-piece luggage set, enough for about a week's vacation, would only fit with the rear seat folded flat.
That's a really high liftover right there. Again, they mentioned that in the Pontiac 1000, but that seems like a really high liftover relative to the bumper, relative to the actual cargo space inside. Maybe the car is just so low it isn't as high as it appears to me.
A temporary spare tire and good scissors jack is located under the cargo floor. Drivers will find a pleasant environment, but it's not quite as comfortable as we'd like. Seats are thinly padded, but with good back support. The standard dash is simple, but lacking most desired gauges. The 1983 Colts will have a restyled dash that includes protruding Subaru-like control knobs for lights and wipers, and even more idiot lights.
I am glad that that is something that got abandoned pretty quickly. Several manufacturers did things like this. I know that some in Europe did as well. Citroens, I believe, not putting it on the column but putting it out here. That just never made any sense to me at all, and really just an ergonomic failure. I'm glad that came and went very quickly.
Brakes were also a mixed bag. Stops from 30 were of acceptable length at 39 feet, but a mushy pedal failed to inspire confidence. From 55 miles per hour, results were better, with distances reduced to a short average of only 119 feet, an excellent showing. But pedal pressure was very high. No pull or rear-end swing around was noticed, but there was quite a bit of brake lock and gobs of fade. I guess you can't have everything. The single overhead cam engine in our 2,140-pound Colt pumps out a respectable 72 horsepower, second highest of the 4 entrants. Even with an automatic, that translates into a mileage estimate from the EPA of 29 city, 35 highway. The MotorWeek 100-mile test loop simulates typical urban driving with a good mixture of 2- and 4-lane streets and highways. So even we were impressed with its average of 33, considering its slush box nature of getting power to those 4 tiny wheels. To sum it up, it's easy to see why the Mitsubishi Colt is a highly studied car. It does have enough compromises to make it less than perfect, but as you'll soon see, none of our contestants is anyway. But as Detroit has already found out, it's a remarkable mixture of small size and acceptable comfort, suitable for both Tokyo traffic jams and wide-open American interstates.
That was really interesting, and a couple of ending thoughts there on the Mitsubishi. It's a Dodge, but it's a Mitsubishi, right? So what are, here's what their complaints were. Thinly padded seats, brake fade. There's nothing here that a light redesign would not make substantially better. Bulk up the seats a little bit, maybe improve the brakes. There's some tweaking here, and that would have been an exceptionally good car. If you think about taking that 1.6, if it's already pretty powerful, passing through an automatic, imagine taking that, making it fuel injected. It easily would have been a class leader here. I wish they had a Honda and a Toyota, maybe a few other cars to compare. Every comparison test I ever see, I always wish they had more cars. But that was really surprising to me how well it did. And to me, since I've done videos about why is Mitsubishi staying in America and why aren't they taking it seriously, this shows you just how good they were, although they maybe didn't have the notoriety of the Hondas and the Toyotas and the Nissans. They were building really, really competitive cars, at least in this market at that time. So let's go.
Now, from Japan, we go halfway across the world to the biggest car maker in France, Renault. Our contestant is reputed to be the world's most popular front-wheel drive car, the Le Car. It's certainly the winner of any contest on character, and as you'll see, maybe eccentricity as well. The Renault Le Car, known as the R5 in France, first went on sale in the U.S. in 1976, 4 years after its European introduction. Unlike many imports, the Le Car boasts...
That is an ugly little beast, isn't it? I don't know if it's the color they chose or that it's so French. I mean, it's like squared off and tall and narrow, and it's just hilarious. You know, I will say that while I don't have a great opinion of Renault and Citroën and even Peugeot, with apologies to the new Chrysler overlords, that for the reliability, right? You always hear about French cars just like pieces falling off. But you do have really good opinions. I have very good opinions of their engineering. They may not make it as durable and reliable as the Japanese, but they build some really, really good stuff. If you look at, and I'm sure they're going to mention it here in a second, that Renault at the time either partially owned or all owned American Motors. American Motors cars were using French engineers, and they came up with some really, really good stuff. May not have been built well, may have had some durability, you know, maybe they needed to test it a little bit more, but they're actually good engineers, so I'm really curious to see how this performs.
A wide, well-established dealer network by being sold through the American Motors Corporation, now largely controlled by Renault. The four-door hatchback was not brought over until 1982 and has opened up a wider market to this, the smallest and lightest of our four contestants. And although it also contains the most diminutive four-cylinder engine of the lot, it is not without performance. In fact, Le Car racing is becoming a big, low-buck sport from coast to coast. As proof, from 40 to 55 miles per hour, we found...
So before the Miata racing, people did the Le Car. Sure.
Found a third gear passing time of 5.9 seconds to be acceptable and as fast as any of the test rivals. But beyond that, its 1.4 liters and 51 horsepower quickly run out of pep. Over our 500-foot acceleration run, designed to measure performance in an everyday light, the Le Car dropped to last place with a time of 11.5 seconds and only 49 miles per hour. The problem is mostly in the transaxle. Small engines need all the help they can get, and that usually means 5 forward gears. The Le Car's rubbery shifting manual has only 4, despite my constant attempts to shift higher. The engine is willing, but the drivetrain is weak. Thus, a quarter-mile time of 21.5 seconds and 66 miles per hour also gets the booby prize. On the other hand, our Le Car...
Booby prize. I don't think you can say that anymore. I think that is offensive to people, and therefore you can't say it. But this is old. I will choose not to censor it out in the interest of being historically accurate.
Surprised us in its ability to handle. Like most French cars, its suspension is super soft with an unusually high ground clearance. That normally translates, and does here too, into oodles of body roll. Yet our Le Car was the fastest through our low-speed slalom course, thanks in part to a stiff, quick, and precise manual rack and pinion steering and a good, if tiny, set of 13-inch Michelin tires.
Look at how thin those tires are. Oh, that's hilarious. They look like pencils from here. And who I know they just said, you know, the French cars have soft suspensions, but what was the spring rate on that? Jello?
But I wouldn't get too carried away in any Le Car race-off, since in our high-speed emergency lane change, you do sense that just a tad too much speed and jerk could prompt the need for top-mounted roller skates. In other types of emergencies, like when you wish to stop on a frank, the Le Car does exceptionally well. From 30 miles per hour, stops averaged a brief 31 feet. There was some occasional front wheel lock, but never pull nor fade. From 55, the power front disc rear drums were even more impressive. Very short panic stops, averaging 117 feet, made the Renault our brake test champion. Drivers commented on how secure it felt, despite some increase in pedal pressure, while making note of the near total absence of rear-end swing around. Again, some credit must go to the tires, although their wheels were a source of concern. No one could get used to the fact that each wheel is held on only by 3 small lug nuts.
nothing says my car is built for performance, acceleration, and handling like 3 lug nuts. I mean, I guess it's enough. I'm sure some engineer did some calculations on that, but if I bought one of these and I saw that, I would freak absolutely out. That's hilarious. How cute.
I'd feel better with 4. But then there isn't much about the rest of the Le Car's appearance that isn't unique. Styling is bug-eyed but cute, looking taller but more squished than it should. Paint quality and body panel fit were very good and really left us with only one complaint. Every time we filled up our Le Car, back pressure in the fuel tank would cause gas to belch out even after the cap was replaced. Not only will that eventually mar the finish, but it could start a fire as well.
Wait. So after you put the cap back on, it could force fuel out? I don't understand how that would be possible, or if they designed for it, why. Interesting.
That narrow styling, just right for small Parisian back streets, translates into a cramped but very upright cockpit. Although you sit high in the Le Car, even tall drivers had plenty of headroom.
I love the 80s. They would literally just put a stereo wherever they could figure, oh crap, we forgot it. Let's stick it down here on the floor, or, you know, like the Citation. Just turn it sideways and stick it in there. I would drop crackers and soda into the tape deck.
The sculptured black and tan dash did lack a glove box, although there is a lower package tray and large door pockets. The great-sounding AM/FM radio, however, sits upright on the floorboard and is difficult to tune without looking away from the road. As for other controls, fingertip switches allow one's hands to stay on the steering wheel as your eyes monitor the speedometer, fuel gauge, and an incredible array of symboled warning lights. 2 adult backseaters, however, will fare less well, as both head and legroom are just acceptable. An entrance through the small doors over high sills is tricky, a problem with most 4-door subcompacts. Also lacking is the size of the trunk. As with the Colt, our standard set of luggage would not fit. The full-size spare tire takes up a lot of room. But the rear seat does fold forward and flat and transforms the Le Car into a mini station wagon for 2, a more practical use of the limited space. The Renault...
You know, I'd like to jump in there. I don't know much about the Le Car. I think I've seen maybe 2 in my entire life. They were never really popular when they were being sold here. So I don't know when they were sold. I don't know when they were introduced here, and what their sales figures were. I don't know the history of the car, because this feels like an older design. It's really interesting to me. I'm trying to put my thoughts together here. I mean, it looks to me like in the dash you could build something and mount the radio up there. I don't know why it's down on the floor. They didn't have a glove compartment. Maybe that's a French thing. It wasn't important, but it seems like you could redesign part of the dash where you're not touching all the HVAC stuff and just put in a glove box right there. The rest of the ergonomics looked really fantastic. It looks really tight, shoulder to shoulder, but the gear shift, the turn signal and the other fingertip controls right there, really clear and really close. That looked like really good ergonomics, especially for the early 80s where things sometimes got spread around a little bit. But then when you look back at the trunk and you've got that huge spare tire, it's not under a cover, it's not set down, tiny little legroom in the back seat. This feels like a car, not just from another continent, but from another time. Like before they started valuing the interior space and the cargo capacity a little bit more. You know what I mean? I'm going to look up some more information about the Le Car and its history and when it was actually designed. I get that it's French, and so being narrow and a little funkier, I get that, but there's some things here just feel like it was an older car updated and still being sold in the 80s, but I don't know that for sure.
Nose turning circle at 33 feet was also average for the group. The base model Le Car is the cheapest car sold in America at $4,795. Our deluxe 4-door, with most options including air conditioning, totaled out to $6,977.
only $69 ahead of the more Spartan Datsun Nissan Sentra.
So consider those prices for a minute. $4,700 in '82. If this was still being sold in '86 when the Yugo came on the market, and the Yugo, basically fell apart as you drove it home. Imagine a world where the French Le Car was the better vehicle.
But by the time Renault finished installing all those options and complying with federal emission controls, there was little space left for the engine. It is very cramped, even for routine service. Plus, the lack of a 5-speed gearbox puts the Le Car at a mileage disadvantage. The EPA rates this model at 32 city, 40 highway. In theory, second only to the Sentra. However, in practice, the best we could manage was 29, the least thrifty of the group.
Well, no one builds cars quite like the French. But now, before we get to our third test, just a reminder. Since you've already got your paper and pencil handy, why not use them to tell us how you like our Comparo road test? Want to see more? Let us know.
You've watched too many YouTube videos when he says, before we get to the next comparison, let me tell you about the sponsor for this video. I don't have a sponsor, but I just thought, oh, that's what he's going to say.
Now, that pencil's still sharp? Then let's take a look at our third bride-to-be, also from Japan. This is the long-awaited replacement for the Datsun 210, a car that held the gas-sipping crown for more years than we can remember. The new kid in town, the Nissan Sentra.
I admit I'm pretty excited about this one. As you know, if you watch my videos, I'm a Nissan fan, and I was a Nissan fan before I ever considered buying one. So this is going to be interesting. I'm interested to see how a resurgent Japanese, very large manufacturer, they were fourth, I think, is going to compare with the final test, which is obviously going to be that Golf.
The Nissan Centro was introduced in the late spring of 1982, making it the newest design among our 4 contestants. It is also the biggest, being 6 inches longer than the Colt, a foot longer than the Rabbit, and 2 feet more than the Le Car. Yet it weighs in at an even ton, only 80 pounds heavier than the Renault product.
Wow! Think about that. That's what the Japanese were so brilliant at back then. They could get more space and keep the weight down. So many American products, I hate to keep kicking on them here, but they might be able to meet the same size, and they always felt like they were heavier unless they totally cheaped out on it and made them just cheap. But this thing is 2 feet of steel longer than the Le Car, and it's only 80 pounds heavier. That's amazing.
The Sentra is also the only one of our 4-door subcompacts not to have a rear hatch, preferring instead a traditional trunk. But contrary to first impressions, that is hardly a disadvantage. The trunk is huge, long and flat. It was the only car besides the Rabbit to take all 4 bags without folding a rear seat. The front cabin is also very roomy, more than large enough for 2 overweight inhabitants, with seats comfortable enough for hundreds of miles without backache. All the extra length of the Sentra means the biggest rear doors and easiest entry of the group. Plus, with the front seats all the way to the rear, there is plenty of knee room. Since the Sentra is also the widest of our test cars, there is space on the fixed rear bench for 3 honest-sized adults. Inside, this is a big car. But space utilization does not end there. The wide, if plain-looking dash also includes a full glove box and 2 cubby holes, just right for a set of keys or a pack of smokes. And
oh yeah, okay, so there you go. I don't think you can say that kind of stuff on TV anymore, not broadcast TV, pretending that people might smoke in their car. Oh, the horror. You might entice children to pick it up.
That isn't enough. There are 2 convenient door pockets. Nissan, however, has not been so generous with instrumentation, although it does at least include a temperature gauge. But your affection for the Sentra will not end inside. It's great in tight spaces too, with a turning diameter of only 32 feet, only 1 foot larger than the best of its rivals. And price? With a base price of $4,949 for the cheapest version and a $6,918 list for our four-door test car, this Nissan product gave us the most usable car for the buck, more than any of the other four.
For $6,000, I would buy one of these right now. Nissan, I'm here to tell you. That's fantastic. I mean, just initial impressions here is just think about that for a minute. It's the longest, it's the largest in size, under instrumented, if it will, but you know, lots of little thoughtful places inside to store things. You know, it's comfortable and it's inexpensive with the tightest turning circle in spite of being the longest. It'd be interesting to see what the performance is here.
But it may not be the best car of the four. If you like lots of styling in your cars, the Sentra may not be your cup of rice wine. We found our four-door a rather boring shape with the huge black federal safety bumpers protruding awkwardly from the rest of the design.
Okay, yeah, I can see why they made the comment on the Colt about the bumpers being better integrated, because these big black bumpers are sticking out. It looks like about that much. Yeah, now that they point it out, I can't unsee it. And I'll admit, this is kind of a homely little car. But hey, you've watched my video on all the cars I've owned. You know I don't like exciting ones. This one's speaking to me, guys. This one really is.
Although exterior paint and trim were up to normal Japanese standards, we did find a couple of uncharacteristic flaws on the interior, like this one, the inside door molding that refused to remain attached. Could Nissan quality control be slipping?
Okay, no joke. This is absolutely hilarious. I had a gasket around the door of my Nissan Versa. Okay, again, don't laugh. I love that car. But one of the rear doors had a gasket around it, and it would constantly come off. You tried to glue it, and it would come free again. So apparently, this is 20 years in the making. They're still doing it.
Could it also be that the Sentra has totally forsaken handling in the search of ride? Through our low-speed slalom course, the Sentra was the slowest of our group. We couldn't blame it on the power rack and pinion steering, which, while numb, was plenty quick. The real culprits were the front McPherson struts. The combination of two soft springs and very slow-responding shocks meant abnormal body lean in turns. The car would roll until the outside springs were fully compressed. Then, trying to roll more, it would force the tires to hop outward around the turn. At least the rear end stayed put.
Well, that's a little interesting. I mean, you think of the Japanese being really talented engineers. It sounds like they were trying to make a small car that rode more like a big car without the downsides of what they said with the Dodge Colt, where it got, sharp over rougher roads. I guess they were just going purely for ride quality here.
That is, until the high-speed emergency lane change, where the stern then quickly got out of hand. It took several attempts at entering our course at the customary 55 miles per hour before we could keep the car from broadsiding down the road. Even under control, you can still see a lot of tail twitch. We finally blamed the high-mileage, white-walled Yokohama radials for most of that trouble. Nissan suggests only 26 pounds of air for normal use, a low recommendation for such a tire.
What the heck? I mean, the car has a soft suspension. It's twitchy in emergency handling. Okay, I get that. That's actually a concern. So why do they wash it and then throw a bucket at it? How is that fixing anything? I mean, what is the logic there? I guess I'm just not seeing that one.
Heat of the day had them up to 35. Since these tires are not known for great traction anyway, it made a bad situation worse. But you exclaim, this is not a performance car, and you're right. And at highway speeds, the Sentra is a delight. It would seem to be a great small car for people who don't like small cars. The ride is soft, if a bit wallowy, but only over broken pavement did we feel any harshness. Since the Sentra is designed as a high-mileage car, we also did not anticipate great acceleration, and thus were not disappointed. But a passing time of 6.7 seconds from 40 to 55 is slow and was the slowest of the four. On the other hand, the excellent 5-speed manual transaxle did allow some face to be saved over our 500-foot and quarter-mile contest. A time of 10.9 seconds and 50 miles per hour for the former, and 20 seconds and 69 miles per hour for the latter, while again slow, gave it third place among the competition. Braking results were also so-so. From 30, distances averaged a good 35 feet. There was no locking nor fade with moderate pedal pressure. However, from 55, things again changed. The rear brakes would tend to lock first, causing some wheel hop. This combined with a light back end and those hard, hot tires produced consistent tail swing around. Distances still averaged an okay 133 feet.
That is so disappointing. I have a high opinion of Nissans. I'm not sure that they've ever been quite as reliable as Hondas, or maybe as refined as Toyotas, but I have a high opinion of them. And when they were a purely Japanese manufacturer, and this is super disappointing to me. Not terribly fast, doesn't handle, and then this, you slam on the brakes and you actually go sideways. It'd be very easy for someone to spin at this point and lose control, because we don't really teach emergency handling anymore, as far as I can tell. So this is super disappointing to me.
But we honestly think that a change in tires on the Sentra could cure a lot of its problems. But one thing you're not going to want to change is mileage. This so-called E for efficiency engine is the heart of the matter. Its overhead cam, hemispherical combustion chamber design produced an EPA rating of 35 city and 50 highway for our four-door. MotorWeek's urban...
That's fantastic. That's amazing. That's fantastic mileage.
Loop produced a class-winning 44, a terrific performance.
Indeed it is. But we have one more to go before we see who our winner is. So our last but not least contestant is a car that's been synonymous with efficiency and practicality for the last 8 years, the Volkswagen Rabbit.
The Volkswagen Rabbit carries a number of distinctions in our comparison test. First, it's next to the oldest design in the group, having first crossed the pond in 1975. Second, it was the first car to really popularize the now famous two-box design. That's a box in the front for the front drive engine, and a box in the back for you and me and everything else. But the third is perhaps the most important. It's the only one of our group actually assembled in America. This Pennsylvania-made Rabbit is a lot more domesticated than its German forebears, and that makes it something of a strange hare.
So I'd like to say that, first off, I think that the Golf is probably the perfect car. Another one of those, I've never owned it. It's just never quite made sense. I talked about in a video about Mazda that I actually drove a Mazda Protege and a Golf back to back, and I was surprised how close, actually it was a comment to a video, how close the Protege was to the Golf, but thousands of dollars less expensive. I've always liked a Golf. I would love to have one. Again, I think it's just about the perfect car. But they always strike me as expensive, and unfortunately, my wife's opinion is that it doesn't look like you're a successful person driving a Golf. It looks like you've borrowed your daughter's car. So, got high hopes here. I really like Volkswagen. I like the Golf. I've got high hopes here. And also, I'd like to say it's easy to forget that Volkswagen was successful enough at a point in the 70s where they built a plant in Pennsylvania, which closed down, and then it was, 30 years later or something like that, that they opened up another plant here in America. So cool. Let's see how it does.
Styling is still almost all European, with only U.S. safety bumpers and marker lights detracting from the theme. This efficiency of design makes our Rabbit the second shortest car of the group. Volkswagen has also gone a long way in proving that American workers need to take a back seat to no one in the areas of fit and finish. Most body panels met smartly with all trim flowing in straight level lines. Paint quality was also good. There was no orange peel on any of the vertical surfaces. That's a rippled look coming from too little paint, a hard fault to overcome for any mass production car and common to most regardless of the price. I did notice one slip in the otherwise glossy finish. There were several runs in the rust proofing on the very bottom of the rocker panel. At least they were in a mostly invisible place. But performance is where most of the compromises come to fore. If you want a smooth riding economy car, the 2,194-pound VW Rabbit will beat all comers. It really does feel like a much bigger car. But you pay for that supple ride with a lot of body lean and turns and too much front-end plowing and tire scrub. The car seems light to the point of concern. The feeling is that if you let it go too far, you won't recover. On the other hand, the U.S.-made Goodyear Arriva all-weather tires were a big improvement over most standard import rubber and helped add feel to the otherwise numb power rack and pinion steering. Acceleration was mostly a bottom-end story, right where you need it in everyday driving. A reasonable time of 5.9 seconds in our 40 to 55 mile per hour passing test was followed by a better-than-average sprint of 9.7 seconds at 53 miles per hour over the 500-foot on-ramp course. Only over the quarter mile did the pace slow, to an only average 19 seconds and 70 miles per hour. But that's not due to the otherwise strong engine as much as it is to the smart shifting 5-speed manual. It has an overdrive 4th and a super economy 5th gear. However, the VW Rabbit was easily the most spirited of the group. Although 4 doors do make all subcompacts more attractive for family use, the sheer lack of length always means smallish portals. Getting in and out of the Rabbit takes a bit of doing for the back seaters. The rear seat does have long cushions, but sits too high for adequate headroom. That rear seat does fold completely forward, so pouring luggage through the 5th door hatch can be like tossing water into a bottomless pit. A full-size spare is also located under the cargo floor. The driver's cabin is much more roomy with plenty of headroom for 2 all-star forwards. The seats are German hard but could stand more lateral support. The dash, it's a refreshing sight. Simple, handsome, and looks expensive since it's completely covered.
I'd like to say they've got the radio right up on top. Not sitting on the floor, but right up on top, and that's something you started to see, I guess during the 80s more than anything else, where people analyzed what drivers were touching the most. They weren't modifying their HVAC, right, their air conditioning or their heat. They were touching the radio, so they put it up higher. This is very forward thinking of GM, and I like the fact that you've got the turn signal stalk sitting right there on the column.
Covered in padded crash-resistant vinyl. The lower knee bar bolster also should protect any million-dollar joints and minor fender benders. Instrumentation has been simplified from earlier Rabbits. It lacked most gauges and a tachometer, though it did include the economy-minded upshift indicator. In addition, the minute 31-foot turning circle for our Rabbit is one of the smallest we've recorded. It's surprising just how many small cars make much bigger turns. But be warned, the VW's price could turn more than a few heads too. Base price is $5,990, and our mid-range L model has an as-tested list of $8,195. That makes it the priciest of our 4 Econoboxes.
You know, and that's what I was talking about just a little while ago. You know, if you're in 1982 and you're looking at buying a car like this, and of course there's other options out there, but you've got that Dodge Colt that performed pretty well. You've got a brand new Nissan that rides like a bigger car and gets phenomenal gas mileage. You know, the Volkswagen, you know, they've developed a reputation for feeling, you know, Germanic, honestly, solid, and also providing nimble, good handling. But for an extra, what, $2,000? It's no wonder people move to the Japanese brands.
In general, brakes got high marks, good pedal pressure, little fade or lock, and mostly straight stops. From 30 miles per hour, halts took an average of only 30 feet, an excellent showing. From 55, although more dramatic, the results were just as impressive. 6 panic stops averaged a brief 130 feet, what we call short. Only the vagueness of the brake pedal gave any cause for complaint. It seemed like it wasn't really attached to anything.
Wait a minute. I don't understand. If the stopping distance was 130 feet and that cone behind her says 1.3, if it doesn't stand for 130 feet, what the heck does it stand for? Why did she have to measure from it to get to 130 feet? I don't understand that at all.
Up to now, I've talked a lot about the Rabbit's economy, but how does it really measure up? It is the most powerful of our 4 test cars. Its 1.7-liter fuel-injected 4 produces a hearty 74 horsepower. But mileage is still rated high by the EPA at 27 city, 40 highway. In actual practice, over our 100-mile urban loop, MotorWeek produced an unsurprising 33.
Yeah, I'd like to point out right there that number one, it was fuel injected, so you didn't have that big air cleaner right on top of it. So nice and forward thinking of them. And then number two is that spread between the city and highway mileage. I think that's primarily due to the gearing that they were talking about earlier, where you've got a high fourth and an ultra high fifth for cruising, allowing you to get that gas mileage up.
A fitting end to our story that seems to prove you can have German preciseness and a U.S. ride all in the same car.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you, Argiro. Well, that's it. The results are in. So let's take a look.
All right, so before we get to their results, because I'm super curious, I wrote it down at the beginning. I don't know if you saw me over on the side there, but this is the order before they did any of the testing. This is the order I expected it to fall in. If you can read that, and if you can read my writing, VW, the Datsun, the Mitsubishi, it's the Dodge, and then the Renault Le Car as the end. I think after watching this, I think it might be the VW, the Dodge, the Nissan, and then the Le Car. I think the Le Car is just a little too compromised, a little too small, without that fifth gear, just not really good gas mileage. It's quirky and fun, but not really everything at the same time. I think the VW, in spite of its high price, I think it's strong overall, and I think that the scary braking and handling of the Datsun is going to put it below the Dodge. So let's see what they say.
First appearance with 30 points per tester for a total of 180. The winner by a wide margin with 68 points, the Mitsubishi-made Dodge Colt. We like the styling of the Colt, and it was the only one of the group without any goofs in fit and finish. Next, a most important small car category, practicality, with a possible 300 points. Taking top honors, the newest car of the group, the Nissan Sentra. It held more cargo than any of the others, yet could carry its full complement of 5 adults in reasonable comfort. For performance and a possible 240 points, again it was not a close race. The winner, again, the Dodge Colt, with another 86 points. Even with an automatic transmission, its acceleration was near tops, and no car had more secure handling in emergency situations. Category 4, braking. A lopsided victory for the Renault Le Car, with 84 out of a possible 240 points. The Le Car's 117-foot panic braking distance from 55 was not only the shortest, but felt the most secure. Finally, mileage, with a possible 300 points, taking almost 2/3 of them, the Nissan Sentra. The Sentra not only had the best test mileage at 44, but was 11 miles per gallon better than its closest rival. And the winner, with 366 out of a possible 1,200 votes, the Nissan Sentra. A close second, the Dodge Colt. And grouped at third and fourth, the Volkswagen Rabbit and the Renault Le Car.
Okay, so that's why I don't participate in like games, because I'm never right. That's really shocking to me. I mean, the only one I really got right here was, well, the Dodge Colt I got second, and then I got the Le Car at last place. But that's shocking to me. I mean, the Germanic Rabbit, it just seemed to do everything really, really well, and the Sentra ran away with it in spite of the handling concerns. And I mean, it wasn't really close. That's amazing to me. But anyway, that was cool, guys. I hope you like that. You know, is that the order you would have picked? Me personally, I don't think so. I think the Colt, it looked, I know they really gave it high marks on the styling. I don't like it that much. It looks thin and kind of weak styling, and just, I don't want to say cheap. It just looks flimsy. Maybe that's the word for it. Even the Le Car, for its weird narrow styling, looks a little more substantial to me, but there's That's like a super compact competing in a subcompact class to me. Between the Golf and the Sentra, I mean, for price and mileage and boring efficiency, and we know reliability, I would pick the Nissan. But if I saw this and I saw how it reacted on those tires, I'd have to start weighing, okay, well, I buy the Nissan, I get the better gas mileage, but now I've got to go put in, let's say, well, I don't know what tires were back in 1982, $400, let's say, of tires, or I could just have the Golf. I don't know, the Rabbit. I don't know. I don't know that I agree with that. I think the Rabbit was the better, more efficient design. Anyway, I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. So again, if you like these things, please let me know, because there's another one that they've got that I've got my eye on I would like to watch. But I'd like some feedback from you guys. So let me know what you think, and I appreciate you being here. And don't forget, give the video a thumbs up. It really helps the channel with the YouTube algorithm. Thanks, guys.